Starting intro in 3, 2. Hey there, boys, girls, and squirrels. My name is Modstab, known also in the real world as Devin, and this is my wifey.
I'm Cheyenne, also known as Mrs. Stab.
In the comment section.
In the comment section.
So, for those of you that have been following, like my streams and all that kind of stuff, you do know that the videos have been a little bit delayed for the last few days on the channel as far as live streams and all that kind of stuff is concerned. And for one very particular reason. We wanted to release today's Modscast on Memorial Day because it's an important holiday to us, and I think we really wanted to shed a little bit more light onto the holiday as far as keep that the focus rather than all the gaming and extra content and stuff that I normally do on the channel. So for those of you that have been following the channel in its entirety, that's part of the reason. I did kind of announce some of this stuff on our Facebook page and our Twitter, which is the link in the description. Not specific to Modscast, more specific to me as a creator. But that is a great place for you to follow when we do any weird updates or things like that. However, all that said aside, we are here today on Memorial Day.
We are. And we just wanted to take a little time and kind of just talk about the things we're grateful for and kind of give a bit of a tribute
Very much so.
to the men and women who have served and who have given their lives for the liberties that we are so blessed to have. And so figured we would start out by just talking about what does today mean to each of us, and he kind of started touching on that. You want me to go ahead and start?
Yeah, you do your portion, and then I'll go into mine after that.
Okay, so I'm a military brat, and how that works is both my parents are prior military. My dad's a Marine, and my mom was in the Navy, and they actually met down in Cuba. If you've watched an earlier podcast, Modscast,
whatever
you saw that. You probably heard about that, and they're just the most wonderful people. Anyway, they are extremely important to me as my parents, and my dad's father was also a Marine, and he passed away in 2004. Yes, 2004. Anyway, he is a Korean War vet, and he was wounded, and he got a Purple Heart. And honestly, I'm ashamed I don't know more of his story, but that's definitely something. When I get on a video call later tonight with my family and my dad, I'm going to be asking him some of those details because that's a piece of my family's history and a very important part of my dad's background. His father being prior military and all that. So, so on a personal level, if it weren't for the military, I wouldn't be here. And so
that's true. Very true.
I'm grateful for a day in the year. Veterans Day, it's kind of a similar feel for me. I know that with Memorial Day, it's more memorial. So it's probably a greater emphasis on those who've gone before or who have passed or who were killed in the line of duty. But that's what the day means to me.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I guess and everybody's going to have a similar meaning, but one thing I wanted to talk about too is like how kind of like sensationalized our society is as a whole, where it's more about this big celebration, this big party. Everybody goes out and does their grilling. Everybody goes out and does camping and things like that. And
graduation.
Right.
Shout out to you graduates.
There's so much stuff packed into this kind of week as a whole that people forget or tend to forget or can forget why they even have those freedoms in the first place, because we don't take the time to slow down and appreciate the things that were in our past. We're more concerned with the things that are in our future.
Or in our present.
Present, future. I kind of put them kind of in the same category because they're always looking forward. They're never looking backwards. And there's a time and place for looking forward. But I think, maybe you know who the quote is, but it's like, if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it, is kind of the greatly paraphrased version of how that phrase goes. So I think it's just as important to be looking back in the past. And so what Memorial Day means to me, and what I've been really working on over the last couple of years, is just taking time to focus on the fact that the here and now isn't the only thing. So like remembering, like she talked about, the people that gave their life. And like it gets said so many times it kind of loses its charm, so to speak. but people died so that you could have the right to speak what you want. Like, so that you could have the freedom to shop wherever you want, so that you didn't have a government and tyranny that was told you what to do, and if you didn't do it, you just got shot or thrown in jail. Like, people died for those freedoms, and I think so often we take for granted because we're like, well, so-and-so did a bad thing, so freedom is bad, you know, and I think we just don't take the time to realize the sacrifices that people made for us to be able to, is part of the reason why I think the U.S. is the greatest place in existence. You know, like, you have the freedom to be the #1 Olympic athlete in the world, but you also have the freedom to be a fat, lazy piece of garbo. You know what I mean? Like, you have total freedom. There is no requirements of you other than you participate, you appreciate that freedom, and just pay those respects. So that, and half the time you don't even have to pay respect to be able to reap the rewards of the people that came before you. So
it's very true.
For me, it's a day about not only remembering that these people fell, but these were like actual people that made the active decision to say, the freedoms of the people that are coming after me, or the people of my family at home, or whatever it is, it's knowing and understanding that in that moment they said, you know what, like, that freedom, that availability to be able to do what you want when you want is more important than me trying to find a way to save my life, essentially. So it kind of puts like more of a personal perspective on the idea of like remembering those who fell, because they fell by choice. They didn't just get dragged, like, and everybody can say, oh, the war drafts, blah, blah, blah. They still served. Like, they could have done something stupid to be dishonorably discharged. Like, that was a possibility, but they chose to get over themselves and just do it because that's what they were called to do. And so trying to personify the sacrifices people made, I think, is what I've been really working on over the last couple of years.
That's a great word.
Put people like in those positions. Like, we
Make
just
it more
hear these
human.
we hear these terms like people died, people sacrificed, freedoms, but you never actually like put the faces. Like, there were men and women just like us that died so that we could do what we're doing now. And so trying to remember them as people and not as just like memorabilia or a sticker or a slogan, you know, or like a like tombstone. Like, yes, that's what helps us remind us of that, but they were actual people too. And I think if we can circle back to realizing that they were people as well, I think it would be a lot easier for people to truly understand what they had to do and what they had to give up so that we could be where we're at right now. So, and
I think it definitely makes us, at least the two of us, we stop and we really contemplate what specific liberties are we grateful for.
Very
this
much
is
so.
something we've been talking about.
There's a lot of them, but yes.
Yeah. So we're going to keep it concise.
We're going to try as best as we can.
He's going to try. I will succeed.
She will. I probably won't. Let's be honest. Let's be honest.
He's been streaming all morning, and so he's definitely in like commentator
talk mode.
Yeah. So I think I want to let you continue on with that, though.
Okay.
So what if you had to choose one or two of the constitutionally granted liberties we have? We stand on the shoulders of giants and on the lives of people who gave their lives to actually hold on to these liberties. Which ones for you really stand out for you at this stage in your life?
So I want to preface this by saying every single one of the constitutional rights, in my opinion, are as important as the other. You can't have, I don't personally think you can have a successful society with the freedoms we have without putting every single one of them at the top of the list for importance. But there are some that I get to practice more often than others in my practical life.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
So the top two that come to mind is like the freedom of speech, not just like you can say whatever you want, but that freedom of speech also protects some other rights as far as like religious liberties and things like that as well, because you don't have to be squelched for having a specific religious opinion. Now, I'm a Christian, wife's a Christian. We've already talked about that on the Modscast already, but that gives us the freedom to say we believe Jesus is the way, the truth, the life. Like, that's it. And we don't have to have somebody come down to our door and say, denounce that or I'm going to shoot you. Like, and quite literally, that's the standard that the U.S. has set when it comes to freedom.
Yep.
And no different than if somebody were to be of Muslim faith or background and say the same thing about Allah. that is their religious liberty, their religious freedom that the U.S. has given up for them, specifically to be practiced in the U.S. And there's no other place where that is like a guaranteed 100% it is your right, and the government has no authority to step in.
I guess I'm not aware of any other country that does have that.
At least
I'm
ingrained into their constitutional rights. Now, it might be one of those things where they just kind of hands off, but it's not a protected right.
Again, I don't know that for sure,
but that's one of the big ones.
It doesn't seem like there are many countries in the world that where this is like that fundamental, fundamentally and protected right.
Now, again, that gives you the freedom to speak encouragement, speak life, to speak for justice. But it also gives you the freedom to be a stupid a-hole, too. Like, I mean, that's what freedom is. Like, and the nice thing about freedom, and we've talked about this a little bit, I think, in the past when we kind of talked about money and business and all that kind of stuff, and like our 4-step like program that we talked about, I think, in last Modscast. But the nice thing about that freedom is that if you are a good, you're nice, you're respectful, you encourage, you bring life to the people around you, people are going to lift up that person because they feel encouraged, they feel loved, they feel appreciated, more so than they're going to bring up the person that's being a piece of garbage. Now, there are obviously exemptions from this rule, and I'm just not going to go into detail because I'll ramble way too long. I'm conservative. There you go. Fill in the blanks. But generally speaking, the good is going to be rewarded and going to be put up on a pedestal in most circumstances in freedom because it's what motivates people to do what they should do or what they can do. And so that's why I like the freedom of speech being an ingrained right in the U.S. Because you can say what you want and you can encourage and you can do what you need to, say what you need to from both just an opinion standpoint, a religious standpoint, or whatever, without somebody telling you can't say it.
Without you being punished.
Like legally. Like there are obviously respectful rules, like we don't do this here in this establishment or that place or the other place.
But then
there are
it comes
good
down to
rules of like there are good rules of thumb and respect,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't legally have any actions taken against you as long as you're not spreading any like violence and all that kind of stuff.
Infringing upon somebody else's
infringing
liberties.
on somebody else's liberties or freedoms, that's when it becomes an issue, which in my opinion is totally fine. Because freedom is freedom. And the only time it should be restricted is when you're stopping somebody else from practicing their freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's my first one. So what is your first?
Oh.
Because I have two that I really want to outline. But
you kind of took my first one, which was the freedom of religion.
Sure.
And one thing that is so fascinating to me, this is such the teacher coming out in me.
Yeah.
But one of the most influential teachers in my life was somebody by the name of Kareth, and she was my 8th grade history teacher. And she was also, I lived with her family during my college years, and she would invite me into her classroom, which I had been part of. But she would invite me in there, and she teaches American history. Like, that was what she taught. And she's moved to, like different world histories and stuff.
She's done things and
She's
stuff.
done, yeah, but history woman. But I remember how we would have conversations about the founding of the country and what we would talk about with the 8th graders about one of the biggest pulls for the colonies, for certain colonies was that there was religious freedom, like touted by some of these colonies to get people to come. Like, we had to create like these brochures and stuff, like advertising why you should come to this colony. And there was a smattering of them that religious liberty was like the biggest, one of their biggest, what do we call that? Draws?
Probably draws. Yeah. Slogan, and big lure.
And so I hadn't realized that until that was when we were working with 8th graders on it. And so like even when I was in 8th grade, I don't think I made that connection, but I was an adult at the time and I'm like, oh wow, like wow. And so that's something that I just carry with me is this realization that what was the reason why the Pilgrims came in the first place? To escape religious persecution. What was the reason for like the first Catholics coming over? To escape religious persecution.
Exactly.
And then they also had to go to specific colonies in the United States so they could escape persecution. And it wasn't until JFK that the first Catholic president was voted in. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Isn't that interesting? So anyway, it's just so it's such a legacy, and I think it kind of gets lost with all the stuff that you have to cover in American history, but something that I definitely carry with me. And so I try to kind of keep up with what's going on in the world for
as much as you can
for Christians, because we are Christians, and I believe in prayer, and I believe in lifting up the ones who are in really, really scary situations because of what they believe in. And so every time I read about the persecution that these people are facing, I'm kind of whammed with this realization that, wow, I'm so blessed to be where I am, and I might be frustrated at sometimes how I feel like my speech gets censored in certain places or whatever, but it's nothing compared to what they have to deal with. And so it's a good reality check. And
it all circulates back to the idea of it's your freedom. Like, you are not going to be oppressed from a government standpoint to be able to express that freedom. And there are in some places, whether it's religious or otherwise, speech is regulated via government routes, like just in other countries. Like, and I know it's not always public, it's not always huge things that are being censored, but it is, and it can be, and it's ingrained in our constitutional rights to be able to practice that stuff. And so we just don't have to worry about that being an issue. So. All
right, so our computer's going to die soon. So what is the second liberty
This is how we stay on track.
You are grateful for.
We're staying on track. You heard it here. Second freedom I have. So we talked about kind of the freedom of speech, and I tied it into freedom of religion as well, and she talked about specifically that freedom of religion. The one that I think there's only one thing that can be removed from our constitutional rights that will not guarantee the sanctity, so to speak, of the others.
That will not? Or that
will not guarantee the sanctity of the others. And that is your right to bear arms. Now, it's something that I've always been passionate about, but it's something that I've never officially owned, like a sidearm for like any type of protection or anything like that, because living in the area I did, you just don't have to worry about it. And quite frankly, you still don't have to worry about it in the area we live in, because it's a pretty low-key, pretty conservative, pretty, backwoods, for lack of a better term, area.
There's a lot fewer people.
Very rural. So you don't have to worry about that being an issue. But it's actually one of the most recent rights outside of, the freedom of speech that I practice. And the reason I say that it's the only one you can remove that will basically no longer guarantee the sanctity of the others, is you can remove the freedom of speech, but if it's an armed populace, you can't encroach on them via like legal ramifications without some type of backlash occurring. Or the freedom of religion, like knowing that you can practice whatever religion you have and you can physically protect yourself from the government or opposing forces in whatever way that may look. You still have that opportunity where they can't just do what they want. If you do, however, get rid of that Second Amendment right, the right to bear arms, and you can argue with me however you want, but if that one right gets removed, the government can by force do whatever they want. Now, we would all hope that that's not the case. We would all hope that our government doesn't want to use force to apply their will, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. So the more power somebody gets, the more power they generally want. That's just the human condition. We want to be in power over someone or something, and we want to enforce that will on somebody, to the extent where that's exactly what like debates and political arguments are all about, is trying to enforce your power, impose your will on somebody else to make them believe what you want. Now, once again, without the right to bear arms, they can do that by force. They can take away your freedom of speech. They can take away your freedom of religion by gunpoint if need be. But having an armed populace, whether you like that idea or not, is one of the reasons that not only keeps our government from acting, but when we talk about the bombing at Pearl Harbor, it was one of the reasons they didn't just push into the middle of the U.S.
Who's they?
The Japanese.
Who's they? Thank you.
I am just assuming that people know this knowledge, and I probably shouldn't. And I probably shouldn't. However, it was one of the reasons that they didn't try to push in further, because they knew that we had a very armed populace. And so I think that's really important. As a matter of fact, I'm carrying right now. It's not loaded because I'm at my house and I'm getting used to like the weight of it. But like this, like something like this, you can't just go over to another country and say, oh, I want a firearm. Cool. And go get one. Granted, there's background checks and things you have to go through. If you have not gone through the process of this, I would heavily recommend it. If you guys want to try to complain about the right to bear arms or conceal carrying or open carry or whatever it is, complain about it, but at least go through the process. Return the gun if you have to. I don't care. But there are background checks that need to be taken. There are things that have to line up. And if you have one of those things that doesn't line up, you're out. You can't get one. Like that's just how it is. So it's heavier. It's more heavily regulated than you would think, but it's also not as heavy regulated in some states as it is others. Now, for instance, like Wisconsin, like we're an open carry state. Like you don't have to have an active permit to open carry. You just have to be above the age of 18 and not have some type of, criminal record.
And you have to be mindful of the different areas in your community where
Absolutely.
you're
they're government buildings. You can't bring it into government buildings, conceal or otherwise. So there are rules and regulations, but we have it pretty fortunate in Wisconsin where we are an open carry state, so you don't have to go through quite as harsh of a regulation as, let's say, like Illinois, for instance.
It's pretty intense process. It takes a long time.
But that's one of the things, without getting too far off topic, that's one of the things you have to know as a responsible gun owner is just what your rules, what the regulations are. Make sure you're not breaking those because you want to stay within the parameters of the law, once again, unless the law is entirely infringing on your freedoms. So, like, where everybody will talk about, well, I should be able to carry wherever I want. I'm not a huge proponent of that exclusively. Now, that being said, I think for instance, me personally, and this is going to be an opinion piece, fight me in the comment section if you want, I don't care. I think what would deter a lot of the issues we have is having guards. So maybe not everybody can carry, let's say, on a school perimeter, just to put that out there. Well, Joe Schmo down the street can't carry there. That's fine. Put somebody there who can. Why? Because that'll deter any issues. There's many examples of this, like churches where somebody tries to open fire. One of the guys pops up and he's a concealed carry instructor and shoots the guy down before he massacres 20, 30 people in like a giant synagogue. Who aren't armed, by the way. And really, like, then once again, back to the whole nice things about the freedom, it is your 100% right to say, I don't want to carry, I just don't like the idea of guns. That's fine. Don't carry. Like, that's fine.
Absolutely.
Maybe I don't like being a slob that sits on the couch for 6 hours a day and has to have somebody bathe under my folds. Like, I don't have to do that. No different than if that's what you want to do, that's fine. We live in the U.S. You can do that if you want.
I feel like that was
it was a very
poor
it was a pungent
comparison.
It was a very stop. It was a very pungent example because that's how strongly I feel about the constitutional rights when people say you shouldn't have them. You're right to be fat and lazy, and maybe you make a lot of money, so you pay somebody to do all your housework and garden while you just sit and watch TV. That's fine. That is your freedom, but that's not something I would personally choose to do because getting up and moving, as much as I'm in front of that computer screen recording and filming and sitting here recording and filming, I need to be out doing something. Like, I need to be moving. I need to be working with my hands. And that is my freedom to do so, no different than it's your freedom to not do that. Like, everybody doesn't have to fit into this box. And no matter what political party you line up with. Like, conservatives don't always have to be pro-gun. Like, they just believe very conservatively. No different than Democrats always have to be anti-gun, like, or liberals, or however you want to word it. You don't always have to line up with everybody else in your party to a T. Now, generally, you identify as those conservative, Democrat, liberal, right, whatever they want to label you at. Generally, birds of a feather, kind of flock together is how the saying goes. Generally, you line up with people that have a similar viewpoint of you, but not always.
Well, and this kind of ties into my second liberty that I'm really grateful for, which is the freedom of assembly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, talking about the people that you tend to flock to, I am so grateful that, especially as a woman, I know the women in many other countries do not have the same sort of mobility, the same sort of access to education, the same sort of ability to vote, the ability to drive wherever the heck I want. I am so grateful for the freedom to go where I want to go. And I'm grateful for all the many generations. It didn't take just one generation to make progress. And I think we forget that sometimes as a culture, that change sometimes just has to happen gradually, and it has to happen in the minds and hearts of people, and that takes time. And so as a woman in today's day and age, I'm so grateful for the things that many men and women before me, what they gave so that I can be so free to choose a career path, free to choose to stay at home. Well, within financial limitations, but that's a whole other story.
Right.
I'm free to make these choices. No other person makes these decisions for me. And the ability to spend time, hence the assembly part, time with whoever I want to spend time with. I have friends, he was talking about conservative versus liberal. I have friends on both sides of the fence. And I
feel like any good person is going to have friends on both sides. Whether you agree with them or not.
You are taking
I'm just saying, whether you agree with them or not, you're going to have friends with different opinions. Like, they're just differing opinions. Like, welcome to freedom.
And that's what I appreciate, is that I'm not pigeonholed into, you can only hang out with these people. You can only hang out with these people. Whether that's political leanings, whether that would be ethnic background, whether that would be social status.
Religious affiliation.
So anyway, I'm just grateful that I'm not pigeonholed into those things. I can go where I want, be with who I want, whenever I want.
Yeah,
mostly.
Yeah,
when
mostly.
I'm being responsible.
Yeah.
So anyway, and we, again, computer's dying soon. But I feel like that's a good opportunity to kind of give a shout out to the people in the armed forces, who we are grateful for, past and present.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of the things, too, that it's a little unfortunate in my circumstance. I know there's people that served in my family, but as far as, like, my direct family is concerned, it's a little more, what would it be, fragmented, I guess, as far as where people are at in communication level of people. So I do know my biological, I believe it was my biological great-grandpa. I think I don't know. Grandpa... I think I know my biological grandpa served, and then my great grandpa on the other side of the family did serve. I don't remember their branches. I don't remember being told their branches, what their rank was, where they served, if they were in or out of any wars. But you can bet that to some extent in that era, in general, somebody was in war and probably more than likely deployed. So. There are a handful of people in my family that I know have served, but we don't have a lot of information on it because it was so fragmented, and it was an unfortunate circumstance. But I think my biological grandpa was one of those that just kind of like left the family essentially, and so it doesn't get talked about much, and I understand why, but it's one of those things where I don't have much information on that. So a lot of the people that I know that have served or are serving tend to actually be living and not like necessarily deceased members of the armed forces. And so as much as I appreciate those that are living, it's really important to me to separate or distinguish the difference between the holidays. Like, I will always thank those who served.
Like Veterans Day versus Memorial Day sort of thing?
And then you have, what is it, Armed Forces Day or whatever it's called? There's like a different day for each. Is that not
Veterans Day?
Veterans is those who have served, and I think there's an Armed Service Day, Armed Forces Day.
Oh, shoot, I'm sure there is. I'm going to get some flack for that one.
It's okay. And I don't know everything in its entirety, as I should. But it's a classic example of one of those things where it's not talked about, like, really at all, hardly. You have Memorial Day is huge and it's hyped up because you're gonna go camping, you go grilling, you're gonna go party with your friends.
It's that turn of seasons,
the turn of seasons, but it's not taken in the same context of like this. Yes, should be something that we take off as like a federal quote unquote holiday to have a day off, but the reason the day is off isn't to go out and party and have grills and stuff. It is to remember the people that gave everything so that you could have whatever freedoms it is that you want to practice right now. So I like distinguishing that difference, which is why I went on that little bit of a tangent. But the people that have influenced me the most and that I appreciate the most are in service right now. One of them is one of my I would consider him a really good friend, Logan. We haven't got a chance to talk a lot, but is serving. He's been through a couple different branches at this point. But we grew up and we were pretty tight buddies. Like we grew up together, learning things, failing at things, encouraging each other in each aspect of our life. And so it's a great example of that mentality of always striving for greatness, always striving for your best, never doing half at anything, and always being proud of what you do, even if others aren't. That's one of the characteristics we both kind of exemplified growing up. That is a very military-based kind of personality trait, because whether people admit it or not, there are things that you have to do in the military that people don't like, like war. In today's society, with how the world works, I wish it wasn't necessary, but I do understand that war is necessary. And so sometimes you have to do the things and be proud that you made that sacrifice, even if people don't necessarily like that it has to be made. So I guess there's that in my long-winded 2 cents. But that's one very specific person for me that has definitely been an inspiration. So
I would say to both of us, because he's a mutual friend. So for me, I kind of already alluded to it, but my parents, I'm super grateful for. My grandpa, grateful for. And the person who is also a current service member would be my bro. Shout out to my bro. He is in the Air Force and stationed in the desert.
In the deserts.
In the desert. And he misses seeing green. He's a Midwest boy.
Lots of green here.
Lots of green. Oh,
That's the nice thing about it. But it's like there's extremes. It's super cold or it's super humid and hot. Like there's limited middle ground.
Yeah.
But it's green and beautiful.
But it's hot all the time where he is. So anyway, I just want to give him a shout out. I have the shirt on.
Got him.
U.S. Air Force.
And obviously the hat that you guys see me wear pretty consistently. So
notice that he
took it off today.
He didn't say it was his hat, which I appreciate because it's really
my hat.
No, Cheyenne bought this hat when we went and saw her brother graduate from BMT, basic military training. So it's my hat. I'm just nice enough to let him wear it.
Yeah, it's mine now.
Anyway,
what's mine is mine.
So anyway, I
mine.
am grateful. I am grateful for my brother and his willingness to sacrifice this season, make sacrifices in this season of his life. I think that's really, to me, what military means is, you thankfully I'm glad most of the time it's by choice. Like right now we don't have a draft, and I'm so grateful for that. It's almost
exclusively by choice.
It's by choice, and so he's made the decision to work for his country directly, and he's putting his best foot forward and aiming for excellence. And as a result, the things he's giving up, he's giving up the change of seasons. He's giving up seeing his niece grow up. He's giving up just being able to have a hug from.
Or go out and eat whenever he wants to.
Yeah,
pick what job he wants.
He has voluntarily put himself in a position where yes, he's getting paid. And he's being
compensated, and I wish it was more. I wish it was more for those who actively went into service, because I think they should be taken care of. Like what always bums me out is, and I know it's first year service, but like first year service, they don't get paid nearly as much as you would hope somebody would. Now I understand there's a lot of people that go in free education and drop out, and you can tell those people in the service, why? Because they always say they regret their service every time. Every time somebody goes in with education in mind or with just a paycheck in mind, they regret their service every time, and that's how they talk about it. And you have those people that served, and whether it was the most fun thing they ever did or not, whether they really didn't like a commanding officer, didn't like the job that they were stationed, or didn't like being deployed here, there, or otherwise, they always come back and they're like, it may not have been fun, I may not have always enjoyed it, but I do not regret serving, because you learn, if you're willing to absorb, you learn so much, and so many good talents and traits and abilities in the service that you sometimes can't learn anywhere else without a very similar environment, which is hard to find in like your stereotypical like civilian society. You know, it's hard to find some of those things, like a lot of motivational speakers, a lot of people that are dedicated businessmen that not just have those talents or traits, but also kind of convey those and teach those to the people around them, tend to have some level of military background, whether it was they served, which is pretty accurate in a lot of cases, or they have somebody that they work closely to that has served or taught them some of those kind of habits. And so I think it's one of those things where it's on both sides of the fence. You know, you have the people that'll talk about regretting service because they just didn't absorb and didn't treat it the way they should have. And then we, even so in the civilian world, reap the benefits of the people that have served when they come back and teach us how to do things, you know, like, and there's always different ways of being taught things, and you don't have to be in the service to really appreciate structure and integrity and dedication, but they tend to exemplify it more. And I think a lot of the reason that's such a cultural standard that was set is because so many people served for a long time.
Oh, wow.
A lot of our great-grandparents and their parents served, and they were able to teach a lot of those standards of living to their kids, and their kids taught it to them, and so on and so forth.
Wow.
And you can slowly see that that's deteriorating a little bit, but that's part of the reason why, you know, I grew up the way I did. Like, my grandpa wasn't in the military, but his brothers were, like, pretty much all of them, as you just get a glean from the experiences that they had. So,
and I think that kind of is a nice wrap, because we kind of started, Devin, with you talking about how you're in the business of like making sure that we personify or
the
humanize,
celebration,
like
humanize,
make it more human and feel more more real. And I think that, you know, kind of circling back, I have a whole new perspective, even growing up in a military home, a whole new perspective for what it means to serve by watching my brother.
Yeah.
And it was interesting this past Veterans Day, and I know you were talking about keeping the holidays separate, but this past Veterans Day, when I was working with my choir kids and we were preparing a piece, you know, my perspective on what we were bringing to the table was definitely altered from what the previous years had been, and I was able to share my heart with them, like, you know, why am I doing this? I'm doing this to honor my brother and to honor the other people who have been in his shoes and who are alive.
Absolutely.
And, you know, and just a way to honor them and say thank you, because you know, it hadn't been as personal for me until my brother went in. So anyway, those of you who may be watching, who may be prior military, who are military, or who have lost somebody in an armed conflict or what have you, we just want you to know that we appreciate you. We appreciate the sacrifice that you have made.
Absolutely.
And we are so grateful for what we have. And we're praying for you, and we are rooting for you in whatever phase of life you're in. So
absolutely.
Thank you.
What I mean, I guess, to kind of like piggyback off you in closing is, it's really important to make sure we know where we're going, but also very much so to remember where we've been, because then we can really focus on what it's taken to get us here. And it's one of those classic, you know, examples of you don't truly understand or know until you've lived it, until you've been through it. So some of us will just never know exactly what it's like to serve or to have lost somebody who served in whatever capacity that may be. And that's totally fine, but trying to find these ways and these creative ways of bringing personality to the holiday that exemplifies why we celebrate what we celebrate is important. Whether that's Memorial, Veterans, Armed Forces Day, or any other holiday.
We need to check on that.
Right?
Yeah,
or any other holiday. Like, why are we celebrating? It's crucial to slow down and not get caught up in the sensationalism that we have here. Like, what's the next big thing? What's next? What's next? What am I doing tomorrow? What am I doing in 5 minutes? What am I doing in 30 seconds? Like, to slow down and remember we came from here. And that's why we're here. And so
I wanted to do this, and I won't come down.
It's okay. Yeah. And I think that's really important. It's okay,
Yes.
Rukia. Yes, salute the flag.
Oh no, I ruined it.
You ruined it. It's okay, Ru.
Anyway.
What? So this is what we're going to do in closing, everybody. I just want to tell you, the United States is the greatest country in the world, and anybody who doesn't believe that can screw off. Goodbye.
Oh my gosh.
Goodbye. The U.S. is the best. The U.S. is the best. Hold up the flag. If you're not the U.S., you can screw off. Anyways, U.S. is the best.
We love
And
our
it always
country.
will be.
We love our country, and we are grateful for the people who've made it what it. Don't crumple the flag up, you
Fold
heathen.
it. Fold it.
Not like that.
Okay.
Okay. Happy
The U.S.
Memorial Day.
is the best. Thank you for our rights. All the people that gave up everything so that that little dog could sit down there and bark without being shot.
Without further
Anyways.
ado, he's gonna show
Thank
us
you
filthy
guys
little
so
cake
much.
hole.
Thank you guys so much. For real though, like in all seriousness, to like settle down and stop playing like a joke and being exuberant and all that stuff. U.S. is the best. Yes, I believe that wholeheartedly. Thank you to everyone who served. Thank you to everyone who has family members who have served, whether it be active, prior, or they were, like MIA, POWs, KI. It doesn't matter. Thanks to all of you that have people in your lives or are those people. And love you guys. And as always, I'm going to shut my filthy little cake hole. Remember, we will see you next time.
And if you haven't, messed with the notification bell, you should do that.
Toodles!
Bye!
Okay. Here's the flag.